Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, historical fantasy and suspense author, and my co hosts are epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens and science fiction author David M. Kelly. Lurking for
Hi.
Legends is an interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or comment on anything you may hear in the show. So tonight we are glad to be welcoming back co-authors Cendrine Marrouat and David Ellis. Thank you so much for being here again.
Yes,
Thank you
welcome
for
back.
having us.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. You all have so much going on all the time.
Mhm.
There's really no end to everything you're doing. So why don't we dive in since you've been here before? Well, actually, I guess we should introduce both of you individually. Just I'm like getting excited to get into your recent books. So I won't get overly excited. Let's ask you to introduce yourselves for anyone who has not happened to see you on our show before. So let's start with you, Cendrine.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for having us. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. So I'll give you the short spiel because my bio is very long. But I have been a writer. I started with poetry. I've been a writer since 2005 professionally, so 17 years. I'm a poet, photographer, fiction writer, and with David, we co-founded Auroras Blossoms in 2019. Have written more than 40 books in several genres, so I basically like challenging myself. And David and I have created a few poetry forms, and I've added a few more on my own. So
very cool. And how about you, David?
I've been writing for years, but I haven't really actually published until much later in life. I only actually started publishing in 2016, but I was writing a blog for a few years before that, and I needed to fill it with something, so I started writing poetry, and that formed the nucleus of my first 3 books. And then from that point, when I teamed up with Cendrine, we actually teamed up in 2019. And to date, I think we've got about 30 publications that we've shared between us. So that's exponentially how much we grew from my humble 3 or 4 books in 2016 to date. We're now sort of co-authored or edited 31. I think it's 31 productions to date with the last couple of books that we've just put out.
Wow, congratulations. That's an amazing amount. That's really something. So tell us, I think we're definitely going to want to ask you about putting out so many things. That would be so interesting. But first, you do have a book that recently came out. So why don't we start with that? Tell us what you recently put out. I believe it's a co-authored book of love poetry. Is that right?
Yeah, it totally is. I mean, so I did half the poems, and Cendrine did a lot of her ones across her career, whereas I think a lot of my ones were ones that I wrote more recently because I've been writing a lot of romantic poetry. So Cendrine kind of dipped into a well of different ones that she was looking at, and then wanted to get some really special gems to put in there. And then I kind of countered it with my particular style. I do found poetry, which is like another term for blackout poetry. And I've been writing a lot for a group called the New Romantics. It's NU Romantics on Facebook, and I publish a lot of poems on Medium as well now. Cendrine and I use that platform very often, and we decided we wanted to create a romantic. Because we do so much inspirational stuff, we wanted to just focus on the romance genre, because as we see how popular it is at the moment with people. But we wanted to be fairly sort of clean. I mean, ultimately, I think there's a couple of my poems that ththey not dirty, but they do get quite sort of sensual. But a lot of the time, it's all to the point where we're almost family friendly, but we're not PG-13. I think we're just we're just trying to explore the romantic sort of side. We're definitely not erotica anyway. We don't our brand for Auroras and Blossoms, we try to be as family friendly as we can be, and we don't have swear words. We don't focus on politics, and we don't focus on sordid sort of stuff. I mean, that's for me in my own separate sort of career. I can do that separately, but not through Auroras and Blossoms. That's our flagship thing that we focus on. But yes, as I say, so we did half of them each, and we come at it from different angles. So I'll let Cendrine talk about how she created her side. My ones, as I say, it was found poetry, but it was more about the exploration of metaphors and love within the words, and being playful, I think, with the expressions in them as well.
So just, I'm always interested in titles, and so I was just kind of like wondering what's the story behind, the name Auroras and Blossoms.
I can handle that one as well. So ultimately, it was a part of our collaboration. Sandrine and I try to collaborate in everything that we do, and try to go halves on everything that we do as much as we can. Based around our talents, though, because Sandrine's a lot better designer than I am. She does a lot of our book covers and other sort of specialized things that she's very sort of talented at. But the name, I always wanted to do a project with the word auroras. I always liked the idea about euphoria and sunshine. I wanted to do something either like Aurora, Euphoria. And so the Auroras thing was always there, present in my mind. And Cendrine is a real big fan of Japanese culture and cherry blossoms, and she loves haikus, and as a main sort of poetry form. And because of her love of cherry blossoms, we just thought, wouldn't that be nice to have two things based for an inspirational logo? Would be to have the sun shining or rising on cherry blossoms, and that's where the name came from.
Cool.
And that's more of like so that's something that people can actually submit to. That's not just, and you've put out multiple and different kinds of publications as well. So how many of your publications are from Auroras and Blossoms? I know you have 31 together total.
Yeah.
How many are?
If you ask me to count, no, I can't do that.
No.
We Auroras and Blossoms basically started like a magazine. We started with a poetry magazine, and then we branched into several different genres, and we wanted also visual content to complement everything. So we closed the magazines because we had two at some point. So we had, if I remember, 6 or 8 issues of those two magazines, and then we decided just to focus on the PoArtMo anthologies. The PoArtMo anthology is a yearly publication of inspirational and uplifting works that David, myself, and several other contributors work together to create. So we have 2 different volumes. One is for adult creatives, so writers and visual artists, and the other part of the PoArtMo anthology is dedicated to young writers between the ages of 13 and 16, which is why we wanted to create Auroras and Blossoms, because we've always wanted to include kids, because we believe that kids have so many things to share with us, and they can inspire adults, especially these days. Kids have great voices, and we should listen to them a little more. In this day and age, we need it. The PoArtMo anthology per se is based on the concept of actions rally thoughts and momentum. Positive actions rally thoughts and momentum, which is really what Auroras and Blossoms stands for. David and I have always believed that the world was too negative. We needed to inspire people. Even in the last book we released, A Particle of You Love Poetry, this book will actually be released in 2 days, so we're very excited about it. Our goal as we wanted to work on a project, especially with poetry, because contemporary poets, especially when it comes to love, they tend to be very negative. They tend to share a lot of negative emotions. So we wanted to counter this by offering a project and a book that talks about love in a positive and inspirational way, because love is not just about suffering and pain. It can be also about beautiful things, about things as simple as waking up next to your loved one, your husband, your wife, your partner, and being happy in the moment. Love can just be about those little things. So we really wanted to release a book that really had this energy in it about positivity and inspiration. And the PoArtMo anthology follows that motto to a T. It's really about inspiring people no matter the topic we talk about, except of course for politics and erotica, which are 2 topics we don't deal with, because we want kids and adults alike to be able to read the publications. It doesn't matter if this the PoArtMo anthology, the youth version or the adult version. We want kids, not like 2 years old, but at least 8, 10 years old to be able to open the PoArtMo anthology, the adult version, and being able to read the book as well, the volumes as well, and be able to share with our parents what they've read and have conversations. And it doesn't matter the topic that people talk about. We've, like in the last volume, the latest volume we've released, the volume number 3, we have a contributor who writes about Alzheimer's, dementia, and the piece is beautiful because it talks about everyday things and the daily things that she does for her father and so on and so forth. So that's really what the PoArtMo anthology is all about. Auroras Blossoms is, as I said, really about positivity and inspiration. And a lot of people tend to see, positivity the way we envision it as toxic positivity, because we ask people to be inspirational and provide something that is uplifting. So they tend to think that, I'm in pain, so why should I be positive? Because if you train your brain to be positive, no matter what happens to you, because we'll have problems, we all go through different things and difficult things. It's okay to feel in pain, it's okay to feel sad, but at the end of the day, what message do you want to leave behind? You want to leave behind a message of, I'm always negative, I'm always sad, I'm always in pain, or do I want to get better and I want to feel good by myself? Do I want to embrace that pain and do something with it that inspires others who are in my situation to actually get better as well? So that's really the essence behind Auroras Blossoms and all our publications.
Because I think that writers are trained to create, because we're trained to create conflict. A lot of the time we think that we have to create either pain or negativity or generate writing from that kind of sort of place. And I think that that's why we see a lot more negative writing than positive, because it's an easy emotion to sort of tap into and share with people. And you can get some catharsis, I think, from it. But at the same time, we believe that we need to put more positive things out there, but not to overwhelm or submerge people. And it's not to kind of even just try and eradicate their feelings. It's to say, put out, if you want to express yourself in the way that you want to express yourself, fine. But it's more about, because people do struggle with, like, when we ask people to submit to us, they don't quite understand the concept of inspiration, or they'll say to us, this piece, this was inspired by so and so, say like libraries or something, and then you just say, yeah, but that doesn't make your piece inspirational. My piece could be inspired by Charles Bukowski, but he might do a negative thing, and then I'll use found poetry, and then I'll turn it into something positive, because I'll take all his negatives and I'll turn it into a positive, but I've created a positive message. And they don't understand about implanting a message in there or something, or some kind of upliftment. That's the struggle that we've kind of faced with, and why we've had to reject certain things to our publication, because people do not read, they come along with something that's what they see, they've been inspired by something, and they say, you should find this inspirational as well. And we're just like, no, because anything can be inspired by anything else, but you've still got to find some way to turn a situation into a positive, even if it's negative to begin with. If the outcome is positive because you either learned something or it had a happy ending in the end, because you might have suffered some loss, and then you went through your journey, you went through your arc, and then came out a better person, then that's what we're looking for.
No, that's great, and I think the world could use a lot more of that. And speaking of being positive, I would like to thank both of you for jumping into the gap. I don't think anyone knows, if you're listening at the end of last week's show, our guest for this week was someone else, and they all of a sudden couldn't make it, and they let us know in short notice, and you guys just jumped in. And that is in and of itself, commendable and nice. But for people to appreciate the geographical distance between you two, you are almost halfway around the world from each other. I know, Cendrine, I believe you're in Midwest Canada somewhere, and David is over in the UK. So poor Dave, it's got to be getting close to 1:15 at night there, and I think you told us off air that you're working in the morning. So we appreciate the two of you coming in such short notice, and
thank you. I still haven't met Cendrine face to face yet, but I hope to rectify that next year.
Yeah. Hopefully travel will get any better next year. So working together, you two guys. Sorry, when I say guys, I mean people. You put out a lot, and you guys are like a famous rock band, and yet you write separately as well. Do you also have your own careers, right? You do your own things as well. But it just seems when I'm looking at your website, there's just I don't know how you have time to do anything else.
It's really about priorities. My cat is here. You can see the tail here. One of my cats here. So yes, I'm not going to speak on behalf of David. He can tell you about that. But on my end, you being an artist is a passion for me. It's what I do. I've had other jobs in my career, but being an artist is really what fulfills me, I should say. But it's, you can, I'm lucky in the sense that I don't have kids and have a big family except for my crazy animals here. So I have time to focus on what I want to focus on. But for the people who have families, who have to, to juggle between different things, it's really about priorities. How do you organize your day? How do you work with people? I mean, how do you make time for what you like? And even if I don't have time during the day, I always make sometimes, I know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I organize myself. And I never choose tasks that I cannot commit to. So if I know I cannot do something, I'm going to say, no, I can do it. So I'm going to choose something smaller. I focus on small steps. For me, it's a lot more achievable. And that's what really allows me to be consistent and to have been consistent my entire career. I know a lot of people work really hard, just as hard as I work. So it's all about being consistent. It's all about choosing, small, achievable steps. Because, one thing I always say, how you have resolutions at the end of the year when you're like, oh, I'm going to read 50 books this year. I'm going to lose 50 pounds. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop smoking. And then 10 days later, you're like, oh, no, I can't do it. I'm giving up. That's because, your goal was too big. You were too hungry and you cannot do it. So it's really all about small goals and what are your priorities. It's all about priorities, I should say. Priorities. It's too hard for me to pronounce. So priorities, small goals and small things so that you can remain really consistent. It's really all about it. And with experience, you learn as well.
I think from my point of view, I can get a little bit too greedy when it comes to projects, because I'll just be like, I want to do this, and then I want to do that, and I want to do that. I'm like a magpie when it comes to this shiny thing, that shiny thing, like a lot of creative people. And a long time ago, I created a motto for myself, which was, so I used the phrase "too full to write." Because the joke was that I was too full of food at the time to finish what I was writing. That was something that my younger brother came up with, actually, and I liked it that much. And people thought that they were just like, oh, some people said, oh, they're too drunk to write, like if they're drinking or something. And I added it because I stole something, I think, from there was a TV show called University Challenge, where the quizmaster would say, I've started, so I'll finish. And I just thought, oh, that's funny. And then I took that as my motto, because I always like to kind of resolve things that I create. So if I create a project, if I have several lying around, then I will try to say, look, well, I want to try to actually finish these. And if I can't finish them, I will then take the guts of them and then put them into something else. And we've done that multiple times with our PoArtMo anthologies, where we've thought about creating a project and then said, actually, you know what? We don't have enough material for this particular project, but it would actually fit very nicely in the current version of the PoArtMo anthology or some other project that we're looking at. And we're very versatile at that because of our versatility, and because also I think that we can get inspired by creating one particular thing that leads on to a stream of other things. I think that another thing that I live by or swear by is endless variations on a theme. And Cendrine created a form, and then we looked at that form and said, well, why don't we create some forms each together? And then we then did one, and then we realized that we could do more, and then she did some more in the background as well. So we are doing things together and separately, mostly together, because we realized that we're building our platform and our brand. And then we then promote ourselves based around that as well. So people might come along and say, oh, okay, what's Cendrine done separately? And they might look at some of my found poetry collections or something as another separate thing that we've done. And that's how I feel like everything sort of feeds into everything else. We try to put things into boxes and try to keep them kind of sort of focused. But at the same time, we're very open to say, well, we're trying to blur the boundaries between why should we not promote one thing over there when we could promote everything everywhere. All at once, like that. It's just like that film, I think, that come out, I think, with Michel Yeoh, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think it's like that, where he's doing lots of different things and being lots of different people. But I like that. I like embracing that sort of nature. And sometimes I can get a little bit too overwhelmed by it, because sometimes I'll be thinking, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I have to then reel it back in again and just say, okay, well, I know I want to do these 20 things, but what can I do today? What can I start today? Can I start something? And should I try and do multiple things? Sometimes it's better just to focus on the one thing if I've got a project that I could finish within a day or two. And sometimes I say, look, I know I've got these 50 other things to do, but if I get this thing out the way, at least I can then go to sleep and think, well, I've done one of the 50 things that I need to do, and I can feel happy about that. And then we can then, because time is finite, but as long as you're actually trying to do something every day, something different every day, and if you're tired, then just say, all right, well, I will leave that until the next day. And I never kind of push people to say you have to do something every single day, because I know some people get burnout and they think maybe they'll take a one day a week perhaps not to do any sort of writing. But I feel like everybody can spare at least, it's this old adage, everybody can always spare at least 10, 15 minutes. And if you can't spare 10 or 15 minutes, then you could easily take it from somewhere, because I waste a lot of time in the day. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I watch a lot of comedy and other kind of things that interest me, gaming videos and things. I just watch people playing things, and I waste a hell of a lot of time. Or I could go off and enjoy a film, or just read a book. And I just say, well, you can read 2 or 3 pages less of your book and spend 10 or 15 minutes, because when you create, I feel like you're giving something back out. If you can create and share something with the world, I feel like you're then taking something and you're becoming part of that creative sort of process. So you don't have to do that. You can just be a reader, and you can be an avid reader, and maybe in order to be part of that process, you might review books as well, and that can be your contribution. But I feel like at least if you're doing something to participate in both the creation and the enjoyment of the media, then I think that joins us all together and makes us all one big community.
It seems like you guys are an awesome partnership because of your opposite. You almost seem opposites here, where Cendrine is very it makes do one little step at a time and keep everything low key, and you're like that, like you say, you're magpie. You're just going go. And I think between the two of you guys meet in the middle there, and it makes a great partnership. I just want to jump into something. We had one of our viewers here said this earlier, and it's a little off topic now, but being positive doesn't have to mean one's always cheerful and happy. It just means one is always moving and looking forward, not dwelling on the down. And she thinks so anyway. And I can agree. Sometimes being positive, doesn't always have to mean you're happy, but it means that you're looking forward to doing something better with whatever situation you're in at the time. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it can be difficult to get out of a rut if you've had a lot of negative, if things happen to you, having a lot of bad luck. But I would never, as I said, I can appreciate people turning around and saying, "Oh, positivity can be toxic," like we said before. But it really isn't. We aren't coming at it from an angle that it's just like, "Oh, that'll solve all your problems." It's more about, yes, life is terrible, but it's up to you to see how you react to it, how you let it affect you. And also, I mean, yes, there are some people, it's sad to say that their lot in life, it is very, very difficult. And it can feel like, I mean, I know people that have struggled if they've lost a job. They might still be struggling to get a job because of the pandemic, or there's other kind of things. I mean, we're currently going through all of these cost of living crises and costs of mortgages and rent and other things cropping up. And I get it. I mean, sometimes it kind of twists me up all around, and I don't know what to do. And I just think, well, at least, I've always, again, I'm someone that loves idioms and adages and things. And I always think of Neil Gaiman, where he just said, look, whatever's going on in your life, if you always just make great art. And that art, it can harness your feelings, and you can turn something. You can turn your negatives into positive. You can create something. But it's not something to inflict on the world. It's something that's saying, look, okay, let's share an interesting experience or an idea that you've got, and let's turn it into something pretty that people can enjoy and use as a kind of form of escapism and get away from reality. Because I think this is why we're artists and writers and creators, because we're helping people find an escape, because we know real life is terrible sometimes, and people want that opportunity to go to a fantasy world where things are happening to people that can solve their problems. And then maybe that makes people feel better about themselves, and then ultimately they then apply that philosophy back to their lives, and then that might make things positive for them for the future.
I saw an interesting comment in your media kit talking about publishers' attitudes towards simple, positive poetry. I wonder if you could perhaps talk about that a little bit.
I'll let Cendrine answer that.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear what you said.
That's because I wasn't speaking very well.
It's got a bad throat.
I said in your media kit, you've got a comment talking about the publisher's attitudes towards simple, positive poetry. And so I was just wondering if you could kind of like talk a little bit about that.
A lot of publishers, I think, and we're talking about, I would say, traditional publishers, because small presses and small publications are a little different. But the big traditional publishers tend to act like gatekeepers, as you probably know, on your end, and then tend to decide, what goes in and what goes out, basically. So what really motivated us to create Auroras and Blossoms, especially the poetry magazine, is to go against the grain, by not being gatekeepers, but opening the door to as many talented, inspirational writers as possible. And then we realized that we really wanted to open doors to all sort of artists, as long as they were uplifting and inspirational. So really that comment was really, to me, it was really about that gatekeeping attitude of what goes in and what goes out, and which is one of the main reasons why so many people choose self-publishing these days and choose to be indie authors, because you probably know what it is on your end. Like in music, the labels, they're going to look at your social media, the number of followers that you have and the number of sales that you've had. And then they're going to say, oh yeah, come. If you have a big followership and you have a lot of sales, they're going to say, oh yeah, come in, we'll take you. But if you're a small poet, a small artist, small musician, and you don't have a followership, the number of followers, they're not going to look at you, and your talent has nothing to do with a decision. They do not care about your talent. They care about how marketable your story is, your book, your music, whatever you do, and how many followers you have. That's what they're going to look at. So really, Auroras and Blossoms for us is about not being gatekeepers, but really opening the doors to people who would be scared to submit anywhere else because they're worried that they're going to be told no. And for us, as long as you're positive, as long as you're uplifting or inspirational, that you want to brighten people's days, then we're going to say yes to you. And as long as you read the guidelines as well, because as you probably know, a lot of artists, many artists, tend to not read guidelines, and we would have a lot more, many more contributors to our publications if more artists actually read guidelines and didn't send us whatever they want to send us. Or we've had many problems, like many publications. We're not the only ones here. We're not victims. It happens everywhere, all over the board. Yeah, really, Auroras and Blossoms is really about this, opening the doors to people who really want to brighten other people's days. Really, that's what it is.
And we also want to make poetry more accessible to people, because I think that is the problem with a lot of traditional publishers. The reason that they don't make a big deal about poetry, I think, is because when people come from a negative aspect to write their poetry, they're sharing their experience. But sometimes you could read a piece of poetry and think, wow, that is an incredible piece of writing. but it can be very specific, and that makes it very unique. But it's not going to have the general appeal, the commercial appeal. So I think you make something that's very unique that could sell to, say, 15, 20 people or 20 other poets. But we're all about trying to create a situation where we want poetry to be more popular than it should be. And it's a crime that it isn't, but then that's the way the world, and I think how disposable things are, because people want short things. It's silly, really, because people want things that are shorter and shorter. And then now I think people are going back to things that are longer and longer, which is why they're embracing novels again, rather than just sort of short things. But when it comes to poetry, as I say, we thought about instilling things with inspirational messages and simple kind of non-jargon. We don't want too much jargon in poetry. Simple. Sometimes if you get jargon in there, it makes things very flowery, and I like that. I like playing with words. I like putting that in some of my poems. But in order, I think, to give it the broadest sort of base possible, we don't mean making it Mickey Mouse sort of really kind of sort of thing, unless of course you wanted to make some very simple poetry for the much younger generation. But I think that you're starting them far too young. We kind of picked 13 to 16 for our youth edition because we thought that's where people are starting to they're reaching puberty and they're starting to learn more things about the world, and also it could be the first opportunity that they might have to actually be published as well. So that's another thing when we say about the gatekeepers with traditional publishing and stuff, is that we want to be where we don't want to have to necessarily prevent people from submitting to us by saying that you've got to have many plaudits. You could be someone that's written a beautiful thing and you haven't been published elsewhere, but we want to look at it. But that's, I think, David, why we've said about the whole thing with the people being gatekeepers or just being negative about positivity, because I've tried to get agents and publishers for my poetry a long time ago in the past, even when I won an award for my first book, and I didn't get anywhere at all because everybody's got finite slots. And if it wasn't for self-publishing, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have the outlet to be able to do it. And the difficulty really is trying to connect with an audience when you have a limited audience when it comes to poetry. But that's why we expanded our remit that's also why we closed down the Poetry Journal when we first opened it, to now encompass things like short stories and flash fiction and positive art. And we allow poetry for kids now. Because we find that's very accessible and a good sort of skill for them to submit to us. But we, as I say, we really broaden our horizons, and that's really done well for us now in the future.
It's a loaded question.
Sorry, I had muted there. Yeah,
probably miles long.
JD,
Yeah. Oh. It's hard to answer this question. We have a few projects, but we're not talking about it yet. Just
that's a secret.
Talking about it. But yeah, we have. We're mostly interested in trying different genres from poetry because on my end, I think I'm done with poetry itself, releasing books of poetry, because I've released so many in my career. I started with poetry, so now I feel like I want to move to other genres. So David and I have projects in that sense. Yes,
we've got projects and we're not announcing anything, but we are very keen to look at different vehicles, and one of those vehicles could be a novel coming up in the future, but that's a way off. So we're just spanning ideas around at the moment. But also, like Cendrine said, we are looking at different specific sort of genres. This is why we focus specifically on the romance genre for the poetry thing, because the reception was a lot different to what we've had to our usual inspirational ones, because you would think inspirational things would be embraced by lots of people, but they're conditioned to look at the negative sort of side. But when we did the romance angle for the most recent release, we actually had a lot of romance authors who wouldn't normally read poetry start pinging tweets around about our book, and we just thought, okay, well, so there is an angle there that we can kind of apply if it comes to we could even, for example, we could possibly look at short stories or flash fiction in the romance sort of genre, or some other kind of sort of genre. But I think whatever we do, it's still going to be very sort of on the whole family focused. Yeah. And I keep going about family focus because the only thing that I've ever done that is a little bit saucy is I had a parody called 50 Shapes of Cakes, which is a parody of 50 Shades of Grey. And I like to bring it up every so often because I've missed the boat on that. I've published it, but I've tried to promote it, and people didn't care at the time. But that's where I've come close to doing erotica. But what I've managed to do with that is somehow turn erotica into PG-13 in that, because whenever you think that there's going to be something naughty, I subvert it. And I just thought, I don't know what I've managed to invent here, but I realised afterwards that it was a PG-13 version of erotica and comedy as well. But that's about the closest that I've ever got to. So maybe that's the Auroras and Blossoms influence that's still getting to me, is that even when I'm dabbling into erotica, I still can't. I have to make it family friendly or something like that.
So to paraphrase, you've got some projects in mind, but you can't tell us, and if you did, you'd have to positively kill us.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in the project itself, we'll have to put you.
Who knows? We have the names now. We'll find you.
We've got the name of either the killer or the victim.
I think it's really important when you're a writer or an artist in general to challenge yourself, because when you always focus on the same genre, you tend to get writer's block. I believe that when you're too comfortable with something, you get a lot of writer's block. And if you don't challenge yourself, you won't go really far, So that's why I want to try different genres. But I've written different genres anyway. I wrote a play many years ago. I wrote a book. I write books on social media marketing in particular. I have photography books as well, and visual books. I do a mixture between photography and poetry, and I've also released short story collections as well. So, and I really enjoy the short story format. It's really nice. It's because I don't have, unfortunately, patience to write a novel on my own. It's very long because I'm a minimalist writer. So, I don't tend to like descriptions. I don't like writing descriptions. I'm not good at it. But it's okay. It's a weakness, but that's okay. I can work with it. I write like haikuist, basically. I'm a very minimalist writer. So I don't need descriptions per se. I don't have to. So that's why short stories and flash fiction are, two genres that work well for me, really. So that's what it is.
I was going to ask. You can create those things as well. That's what I love. Like I've got a collection of short stories, and I used to write flash fiction before I got really into doing lots of found poetry, and that was my kind of sort of thing that I do most of the time now, apart from the projects with Cendrine. But I just like about how self-contained the universe is and how quickly you can do that, because I see, Christy, you've been doing a lot of short stories on your Patreon, and going down different route and having kind of sort of series and other kind of things and segments, and I feel like, and what I like about that is that it does generate plenty of content, because if you just if you say you're going to set yourself up and do a novel, for example, that might take you, if you're going to world build and you've never done that before, it could take, maybe you can speed up the sequels because you've built the world and you just say, right, okay, well, I have these things in place, I can then move on from that. But that's what kind of sort of slightly terrifies me. I love sci-fi and fantasy, but then I love the idea of thinking, well, and then I was talking to my brother about it today. I was saying that how you can start thinking about one thing, and it then ricochets around on all the other things. So you're just like, well, for example, something simple like how do people get power or water or food in the future, and then if you then come up with an idea for that and say, oh, that's how they do it, it then makes you think, yes, but if they did it that way, that would affect that. And I just think, to me, it's just, I like to keep everything up in my head, and I can see why authors go completely utterly crazy about it all, because they've got to get it all out on paper, and it's just pulling that, they pull that string and they keep pulling that string, and I think it can just go on forever in the end.
Yeah, that is a good point. I remember that I used to think that way as well, especially about sci-fi, and just, the domino effect can be more frustrating than anything else. But David might be more of an expert on that, Mr. Kelly, on organizing those thoughts. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that can seem overwhelming, and then it's a matter of probably getting it under control, to some degree. Probably, David, you have lots and lots of ideas about how the future will go and things like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of constantly thinking about it, so it's kind of it's part of my kind of daily sort of brain activity. It's like, you know, how is this? How are things going to go? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? And so yeah, it's kind of like it's a constant process. And but when I'm actually writing, it's like I actually use sort of like some tricks, because like otherwise you get bogged down in the details. So it's like quite often it's like I'll just kind of like insert placeholders, and I'll just kind of like, you know, kind of like say, you know, I the way I do it is I put like square brackets around words, and I just kind of like say, you know, sort of, I don't know, sort of Joe picked up the blob and did something with it, and I just completely sort of like leave that until later, and then come back and it's like, okay, right, so what does he need here? You know, what needs to fill that hole? But it's kind of like, it's almost like a separate process to the actual creative writing aspect, because if you're stopping all the time to try and fill in all of these kind of like mechanical details, I mean, yeah, you get bogged down very quickly, and I have to admit sometimes that happens as well. You know, it's like sometimes I end up, you know, it's like in the middle of there you go, yeah, Wanda, there, you called. I mean, it's like whatever, you know, just so that you know that's something that's not finished, you know. But I mean, if you know, sometimes, I mean, I'll kind of like, I'll start writing something and I'll think, oh my God, I need to know X, and 3 days later I'll kind of like emerge. So you know,
Definitely.
So just before we wrap up here, I just want to go back to this, because I think Dave Ellis, we say Dave, we get confused here. Dave Ellis, our guest. So when you do your erotica and you have to fill in something here, this is probably the best way to do it, is you put triple X. One's got 4 there, but I imagine triple X would be very fitting for doing erotica. But anyway,
with 4 X's, you see, that represents cake.
Oh, there you go. The cake, erotica cake, yes. And we'll stop it there, and thank you both for showing. I can't believe showing up again, and I can't believe how quick this the 40 minutes have gone by. We're actually at 42 now, and so thank you again. Like I say, for filling in this gap, because we had the guest cancel, and you guys were awesome enough to come in here, and especially you, David, because it's very late where you are. And we appreciate you staying up, and give our apologies to your boss tomorrow that when you're like this in front of your computer,
it'll be all secret.
So thanks for coming. And before we sign off, we just want to touch base with Christy and Dave Kelly to see what's to do with them. What about you, Christy?
Yeah, I have the next episode of Corrupted Magic up. It is on, as usual, it's on Kindle Vella and it's on Patreon. So in the meantime, I actually ended up writing and editing 2 episodes in 1 week, which was really, really exciting. Thank you. Very rare. So that was really good. And it worked out well, because it was one of those ones that was like super intense. And so I need like a break after that to just distance myself a little bit and then get back into it with the character. So so I will be working on the next one. Well, I'm like 5 or 6 ahead at this point. So yeah, I did that as usual, and that is pretty much, I guess that's my update. It's my update for every week, but it's always exciting. So how about for you, David?
Always busy. You're so active. Like I always see updates. I'm like, how does she do it? Like
I appreciate that, Cendrine, especially from you.
Yeah, well, for me, last week was pretty much a bit of a null, because I was rather badly ill. But I'm pulling out of it, and I'm getting back to writing the second Hyperion book now. It's coming back to life again. My brain's actually starting to work once more, which it hasn't been doing since about last Tuesday, Wednesday. So so I'm glad to say that it's pulling through. And other than that, I don't really have a lot to report at this point in time. Just glad to be being able to think again. What about yourself, Richard?
Yeah, no, and before I I don't really have anything to report, and this is rare for me because I'm normally always doing something all the time. And I just finished my book, published it last week, so I'm taking a week and a half off, just not doing any writing whatsoever. I already know my next book. I'm just want to give my brain a little bit of time to ease off. And I've been doing so many events every weekend, and this weekend coming up is the first weekend we've had off since like June. So.
Wow.
Yeah, you've been doing it like crazy.
Yeah, I want to get I've got a 4-day event the following weekend, so we're going to be all geared up again. So I think I'll start writing when Legends Rise, maybe next week or maybe the week after. But I almost forgot before we leave. I always ask my guests, "What's next for you, Cendrine and David Ellis? You guys, do you have a co-project coming up, or like in a nutshell, what's
secrets?
for you guys?
We're
Yes.
at phase 2. A small break. That's what I need. I'm really tired. We've been working really hard for the last 3 years with David, 3.5 years now. So I need a small break in. And I think David is going on vacation as well as taking a short break as well. So
yeah, I'm going to America.
Yeah.
California
Okay,
City at the end of the month.
Exciting.
Nice. So we just have
Not for
guests
long
here.
though, just a week.
We just have. I'm trying to get it in here. I'm not sure why we're not. It's not coming in. But there's a question here. How was the Ren Fair? And the Ren Fair is where I was last week in the Renaissance Fair, and they actually had real live jousting there, which is really cool. I didn't think my very first published book was a little short novella about jousting, and I didn't think I would ever see real jousting. So when I heard there was going to be jousting at this Ren Fair, I thought they'd just be running at ring.
Oh, no. Just when he was getting to the good bit.
Like, he's back again.
He's back.
Can you hear us?
Here.
Oh, did I disappear?
You
Yes.
just come out, yeah.
Oh, I apologize. I wonder why this thing wasn't working. I'm trying to get this question on here and it wouldn't come on. Anyway, so I was just going to say, I was at the Ren Fair last week, and that's what the question was, the Renaissance Festival, and they actually had real live jousting, and I was really tickled to actually see real live jousting. I don't think I'd ever see it, but so with me, there's nothing really new coming up until the following week, and I just want to introduce our next week's guest. And actually, before we do that, I don't know if we can see it. My light's probably too bad, but there is that picture I showed you last week. That's fan art. So someone who's bought my books, they actually created that picture, and it's very touching. You can't see it now, but it's about one of my old characters visiting a grave of another character that they saw die in one of my books. And that scene is never in any of my books, but they created that picture, and it was so touching when I saw it.
Nice.
But
Nice.
anyway, next week on Lurking for Legends, it's our monthly live read, and we're going to be entertaining special guest YA fantasy author SD Huston, or Houston. I'm going to have to ask her how she says it. And multi-genre author JD Estrada. And they'll be paying us a visit for a special episode in which Christy, Dave, and I help them read an excerpt from one of their books. You don't want to miss this show because these are the episodes that kind of go a little sideways and a little bit off the wall. But they're the favorites of our viewers, where it's kind of like a Carol Burnett show where we try and make each other laugh. So we all look forward to doing these live reads.
Are you going to dress up as well, just like you do at the fair? I do like it when you dress up at the fair. It's really, really cool to see.
Oh, you must have missed our last live read then.
You need to go back.
Yes, you
You need
did.
to look at that one, boy.
This just came back in recently because I had to shave it off. I was typecast as a woman in 2 different parts, and about an hour before the show, I realized that to be a woman, I can't have a hairy face unless I'm a dwarf, and I'm not. So I had to go and shave it all off, and then and I'll let you look back on the Lurking for Legends YouTube channel and check it out.
I'll definitely do that.
Yep.
And big cups to fill next week. I'm not sure what that means, and I don't think I'm going to be a woman next week, Wanda. So I won't be filling any cups anyway. But so, again, to Cendrine and David, thank you for joining us. And Dave, you get some sleep. And until next
Thank
week.
you very much for having us.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Until next week, for David, Christy, and myself, take good care.
Guys.
Bye.